When the sea breathed slowly after several days on the road, Jack stopped in a small coastal town, planning to rest, recharge, and finally feel that his journey wasn't an escape, but a new chapter of life. He couldn't have imagined what fate had in store for him. The town appeared suddenly, as if someone had unfolded an old postcard right in front of his pickup truck windshield. After miles of empty road lined with leaning pines and endless fields, the sight of old wooden cottages with carved porches looked like a set from an old movie. The faded sign at the entrance read, barely legible, Harbor Point. He slowed down and peered out the window. The air smelled of the sea, seaweed, and something sweet, like caramel. From somewhere came the dull pounding of waves, and gulls called to each other nearby. Baxter, dozing on the back seat, lifted his head and licked his nose, as if he sensed something different. Calmer. Softer. "Well, buddy, how about we take a break?" Jack said quietly, smiling that he had long learned to listen to his inner rhythm. The road had taught him over the past weeks to catch those subtle signals, when to move on and when to stay. And now, something about this place seemed to hold him by the sleeve. He drove onto an old campground on the outskirts, under the pines. There were a few rundown trailers and an old shower that creaked every time the door closed. Jack parked his trailer, pulled out a water hose, and checked the mounts on his Yamaha WR250 dirt bike, gleaming in the sun like it had just rolled off the factory floor. Though in reality, it was an old friend, polished and cared for over the years. Baxter immediately bounded out onto the grass, running like a puppy. Jack washed off the dust from the road in the shower, changed into clean jeans and a shirt. In the mirror, fogged from the steam, his eyes seemed lighter than usual, his face tired but calm. For the first time in years, he realized he wasn't in a rush to go anywhere. The town was tiny but alive. Old street lamps wrapped in shell garlands lined the main street. Small antique shops, galleries filled with sea and boat paintings. A store selling raincoats and warm blankets. People moved slowly, without hurry, as if time itself didn't exist here. Jack stopped at a cafe called Salt and Sugar. Inside, the air smelled of fresh pastries, cocoa, and a hint of spiced syrup. Wooden tables were occupied by locals, some working on laptops, others reading newspapers. The barista in a plaid shirt poured coffee into thick ceramic mugs. He ordered black coffee with no sugar and a slice of lemon pie that looked like it had just come out of a grandmother's oven. Sitting by the window, he watched the pier and boats rocking gently on the waves. And then he saw her. She was at the next table, bent over a book. Her hair was coppery red, loosely tied in a messy knot, strands catching the light. She wore a light denim shirt and worn leather boots, with an old Nikon camera resting by her foot on a frayed strap. She looked like a character from another time, part bohemian, part wild. Jack couldn't take his eyes off her. He smiled to himself quietly. People who hooked you instantly, like a catch in your soul, were rare. She glanced up, and their eyes met. Her green eyes were deep, shadowed like water beneath old pines. She smiled faintly, then returned to her book. Something clicked in Jack. He wasn't good with women. Not naturally, not effortlessly. But now he couldn't not try. He waited until the barista put down another napkin at her table and spoke. "Excuse me, I gotta ask. Is the coffee always this good, or am I just lucky my first time?" She looked at him, mildly surprised, then laughed, softly, sincerely. "To be honest, the coffee's average. But the pie? Worth every sin," she said, her voice warm, slightly husky. "Well, then I definitely made the right choice," Jack said, raising his fork. "I'm Jack. Eva," she said simply. Her name sounded like it had always belonged here. They started talking, first about the town, then about travels. Eva was a photographer, roaming the coast, collecting material for an exhibition on forgotten American ports. She'd been living in Harbor Point for a few weeks, photographing fishermen, gulls, children running barefoot on the pier. "I've got hundreds of shots of waves hitting the same rock," she said, pointing toward the old dock outside the window. "And they're all different. Like the water remembers something we don't hear." Jack listened like music. He liked how she spoke, slowly, with pauses, choosing words not for him, but for the world. "And you?" she asked. "Just wandering without a purpose?" "Maybe to find it," Jack replied. "All my life, I wanted to leave. Everything. And finally, I did." "That's brave," she said, looking at him in a way that made him look away for a moment. Most people just dream. Never dare. Baxter peeked around the cafe door, his tail thumping the floor. Eva laughed. That's yours. Yes, Jack nodded. My truest companion. He's wonderful, she smiled. I love dogs more than people. Me too, Jack said, and they laughed again. After coffee, they went to the pier. The sun was dipping toward the horizon, the sea glowing copper, gulls shrieking overhead. Eva photographed boats, an old fisherman mending nets, Jack unaware in candid shots. Then she handed him her camera. Try it. I'm not a photographer, Jack protested. All the better, she said. He took a few shots. Not perfect, but honest. Eva looked at the screen quietly. You've got a good eye? Not technical, but real. They wandered the boardwalk, talking about childhood, about how sometimes it felt like the world was moving on without them. It all felt so easy, like they'd known each other forever. As darkness approached, Jack returned to his trailer, Eva to her small seaside cottage. He sat long on the steps with Baxter, staring at the stars, a sense of quiet change stirring within him. Something important had begun moving in his life, slowly but inevitably, like the tide. The next morning was warm and clear. Jack woke to the soft rustle of Eva walking barefoot around the room, looking for her sweater, playfully twisting her hair in a messy knot. He just watched her silhouette in the morning light, unreal, as if she were still part of a dream, awake. She smiled, handing him a cup of hot coffee. I woke up when you smiled, he said, and she chuckled, sitting beside him. They drank coffee on the motel porch, watching the world slowly unfold. Baxter lay at their feet, lazily squinting in the sun. The world felt calm and right, as if they'd been granted one more day outside reality. They spent the day together, walking a forest trail to a small waterfall, laughing at silly stories, swimming in cold, clear water, then drying off wrapped in a blanket Jack always carried in his trailer. Eva spoke of childhood dreams, her lifelong fear of taking the leap, and he listened, feeling her words nestle warmly inside him. Long forgotten but alive, when the sun began to dip, they sat by the water, tossing pebbles. Their shadows stretched long, and the sky slowly filled with rose and gold. Tomorrow you leave, right? She asked quietly, not looking at him. Yes, Jack replied after a pause. The road calls. Always calls. She nodded, accepting something she'd known for a long time. Then she pulled out her phone, typed something, and handed it to him. If one day you want someone to join. He looked at the screen. Her name, Eva, now in his contacts. He smiled, saving it. A rare thing that truly mattered. The next morning, they woke together again, holding hands silently, wishing time could stop. But it never does. Jack started his pickup, Baxter leaped into his spot, and Eva held his old baseball cap from the motel room. You'll need this, she said, handing it over. And you, will you ever come? He asked, hand on the door. She smiled, fully, genuinely. When I'm ready to be part of your road, I'll find you. And you won't be surprised. He nodded, leaned in, kissed her temple, and drove off. The road received him, as always. No questions, just stretching out before the wheels. Eva stood at the roadside, wind tossing her hair, gripping the cap like a promise. We'll meet again, she whispered. Far ahead, across endless highways, Jack smiled to himself. He knew this story was far from over.